To Operator Syndrome, episode 59. We are with Steve. We're in Chaplain School in Rhode Island. Where in Rhode Island again?
Newport.
Newport, Rhode Island. Okay, I haven't been up that way. Um, what time of the year was this? Was
This
it
was summer.
cold?
No, it was warm. It
Okay.
was actually very pleasant because the New England area. It's in the summer when it's baking hot back here in Kentucky area.
Hmm.
It's you got that onshore breeze and it's just very nice. So yeah,
So you had an easy class in Chaplain School. You weren't one of the hard classes that go through in the winter,
yeah, right.
right?
Yeah, they get surf tortured in the winter, right? No, no, I was cruising.
Okay. Um, so we talked about chaplain school
Yeah.
some, but we didn't, I don't think we got into um what exactly, one of the things we were talking about was um your backgrounds. Everyone was coming from a background, an area of expertise,
Yeah,
theologically.
right.
So what is it they were teaching you there then? Can you speak to the curriculum a little bit?
I can. Yeah, the curriculum was mostly, so you have all of these different theological traditions, as you alluded. Uh, you already know your background. You know your theology. You got all that in seminary. So I think what their main goal was uh, is is to introduce chaplains to the military structure for
Mm,
one, because they have no clue really how it works. They get a little bit of that in ODS, that officer development course, as far as saluting and how to wear a uniform. But how to fit in as a professional person of skill, within the larger military structure takes a lot of getting used to.
mhm,
Because and I also alluded to this in our previous episode that you're working for your commanding officer as a chaplain. And that's one of the big pieces that I already knew all that. I know what a commanding officer. I get it. That's the main man because of our hierarchy in the military. But these chaplains didn't quite get it, so they're trying to teach you how to both aid and advise your commanding officer at he or she's will or request. You don't go barging in there, even
mhm,
though even though chaplains across the military spectrum, Air Force, uh, Army, and Navy, have an open door policy with their commanding officer. In other words, there's this kind of standing thing where if you see, like, good order and discipline is a term that is held out in the military, is that's part of what a CO wants to make sure is going on. Good order and discipline. There aren't things flying off the rails, people getting bad attitudes, getting crazy. And so the commanding officer knows that the chaplains have their finger on the pulse of stuff that they may never see or hear about.
mhm,
And so that's a real it's kind of a little sensitive issue, because on the one hand, you have your confidentiality to uphold with what's going on, but also if you see repeated things that are not trending well in a certain maybe unit, or maybe whatever however it's broken down to whatever level you're on, it is your duty to go and talk to the CO very gingerly about, okay, I see some concerns here, morally, ethically, whatever, and I need to bring it to your attention. I actually did that. We might get into that in a later episode, to a very high up commanding officer. So teaching you the nuances of how to balance. Okay, yeah, you're a spiritual advisor for your faith group, and then I guess that gets into the other area, which is how do you minister as a chaplain? Okay, let's say I'm on a ship. Uh, let's say a Wiccan comes to me and says, okay, I'm a Wiccan. Clearly, I'm not of the Christian tradition, but I need to do my thing because that's my spiritual practice. You have to you have to facilitate for that person to worship in any way they deem necessary.
mhm.
And that right there, I saw a lot of people struggle with that. like, well, I think that's pagan. I think that's wrong. I think that's evil or whatever. And that's a couple of places where I stepped up to the plate and said, listen, guys, this is not about your personal religious agenda. This is about supporting our troops in whatever capacity they want to work, as long as they're not hurting anybody and they're not, you know, doing something that's against the code of justice. You're not here to judge or to drive, grind your own theological acts. You're here to help them.
Hmm.
And so some people had really struggled with that, and I think several of them may have just resigned their chaplain candidacy because they didn't think they could do it, and that's fine. I mean, hey, that's but it's stuff like that needs to be known. So
Hmm.
so they would teach us, okay, so what if a Wiccan shows up and says, I need to worship. I need some time and space. And so it's the chaplain's duty to collect some data. I'm not a Wiccan. I don't know how this works, but okay, what do you need? Well, I need this. I need this. Like, to put it in Christian terms, I need the elements for the sacraments of Holy Communion. I need a Bible. I need whatever. I may need a prayer stole or whatever those
Right.
might be, and then I go out and find them for them, and then I also coordinate with the logistics side of the ship. I'm assuming we're on a ship here,
Sure.
just prefer pretend, and I find a space that they can meet in,
Hmm.
a time when it'll be um, conducive to when it might be a full moon for a Wiccan. I don't know. Um, so
But you have no responsibility to participate in the
none,
right. I
none.
remember there was a documentary that came out in the mid aughts, I think. It
Yeah.
was called like Aircraft Carrier or something like that.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And they focused on, religious services on an aircraft carrier. And I
Right.
believe it was the Pentecostal group
Yeah.
that had a lay leader, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
so that sounds a lot like
Hmm.
what you're describing. So
Exactly.
you're a facilitator. You're not leading the worship, but anything around identifying lay leaders, is that a
Yeah.
part of it too, or in coaching them? Is that a piece of it?
Yeah. We don't necessarily, I wouldn't say coach them. We would, but definitely, yeah, lay leaders is a big part of the chaplaincy. Yeah, people who have a subset of any faith group who wants to practice more sort of indigenously to how they want to practice, whether it's Pentecostal, whether it's Wiccan, whatever. Yeah, so you assign a lay leader because and you're also correct that we facilitate, meaning we get the facility set up, but I'm not going to participate even in a Christian service. Say it's a chaplain or sorry, a Catholic chaplain.
Hmm.
I'm Protestant. That's how I was ordained. I cannot preside over a Greek Orthodox
Hmm.
service. I can facilitate for that. um, Now, I can preside over many, many different Protestant groups. Now,
Hmm.
somebody might not be happy with that, but that's fine. And they can get a lay leader or they can apply to be a lay leader. A lay leader is somebody who is among the ranks, officer or enlisted, who is of this particular ilk of faith or religion. And then, but our role is to just vet them on, all right, here's what you can do, here's what you can't do. You
Hmm.
know, you may be able to act out a ceremony, but if you're into sacrificing live chickens in your service, that's gonna go against good order and discipline and get a little weird for a naval combatant ship, let's say,
Sure. Right.
underway. Well, so we just kind of try to draw the lines and say, here's your space, you own it, and then we have to recommend to the CO, yeah, I think this person would be competent and understands the rules of good order and discipline, and
Hmm.
then can be a lay leader of their faith group or whatever.
And then I'm guessing then it becomes your responsibility to monitor them and ensure that they're, maintaining some kind of standard,
Yeah, to some degree, yeah. In
because
a
the CEO
minimal.
probably, it'd be, even for a CEO,
Mhm.
they may not feel comfortable, making judgments about how someone is leading a religious service.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And then that's a CO's call. And that was kind of the good thing about the chaplains, because it was like, well, I've done my part. If the CO overrules it, then the CO overrules it, because
Hmm. Hmm.
that's why, like I was telling those guys and gals in chaplain school, I was like, it's kind of helpful to think of your CO as kind of like God. It's like the second God, because there's the Almighty, and then there's what's going to fly and what's not. And it's like, I mean, I'm not trying to be blasphemous. I'm just saying, you gotta, you may think you have some spiritual authority here, but just wait till you clash with a commanding officer and you'll find out real quick.
I'm sure there was different responses to that, but um, from a like pay attention to what I'm saying
Yeah,
perspective,
yeah,
right? Like, let me
yeah,
get your attention here and really try to drive a point home. I can see no better way for a group like that.
yeah. It's the only language I could summon.
Okay,
So yeah,
so couple things that popped into my head that I'm interested in, and then if you want to, we can move on to the Marine Field
yeah,
Schools.
yeah.
Uh, One thing, and some of these may be like chaplain. What's the right word? Um, Urban legends or stuff like
Uh-huh.
that. Maybe you can clear it. So for chaplains, it is r- it is a law, or it is the rule that chaplains can't carry or operate weapons. True?
Correct.
Yeah.
We're non-combatants. Like
Okay.
even medical corps people. That's what, and we may do a future episode for our listeners on the rules of engagement and the rules of armed conflict or armed combat, whatever they're called, because I've had several people reach out to me just personally and say, "Man, I'd love to hear you guys talk about that, the catch 22s and all this."
Hmm.
But yeah, even the medical surgeons and medical doctors can carry a sidearm, but they're not designated targets by the Geneva Convention, by those who play by the rules. So if you see a cross on a tent, which is a surgical unit,
Hmm.
you're not to target them. I mean,
Hmm.
that's a war crime according to those who subscribe to those standards. Um, but chaplains cannot even, they can't even, yeah, they can't be armed. And so in the military's system, they assign them what's called a religious program specialist. Now that's what they're called in the Army. I don't know what they're called in the Navy. I don't know what they're called in the Army.
Chaplain's assistant
Chaplain's
is, yeah.
assistant. Same thing. It's an enlisted person who is basically the chaplain's bodyguard,
Hmm.
because they can carry weaponry if we're downrange, and also an administrative assistant, basically. So they can do I don't want to call it secretarial work, but just logistical work that the chaplain's office. I mean, we have to keep our books, we have our budget, we have so many Bibles we can buy, et cetera, et cetera, like any other command
Hmm.
or any other department. So they are just assigned to basically serve as our bodyguards, and they don't get much training. I don't know what the Army does, but for the Navy, I mean, basically, they come if they're, yeah, if they're assigned to a Marine unit, let's say uh, out of chaplain school, um, well, the RPs, the religious program specialists, may have come just from their A school and not even had a second qual with their weapons, like
Hmm.
what they got in boot camp.
Hmm.
And it, for those listening, I'm not trying to make it sound like they're in any way incompetent, but those of us who train, like in combat and defense and tactics, it takes a lot of training to get to where you're proficient with weapons and to be able to contend with like a serious business situation. And these a lot of these guys and gals just came and reported on board, and they didn't even have quals for pistols and rifles. So yeah, that was a really interesting thing. So yep, back to your original question, we are not allowed to touch a weapon in combat or in our service in any way.
I remember taking our chaplain out on target a number of
Mm-hmm.
times, a
Uh-huh.
number of times.
Yep.
And I try to remember. To be honest, when I remember it, I can't remember. They clearly didn't have a weapon because that would be a problem, and I wouldn't put them out
Yeah.
there on the internet like that to the
Nope.
to the 10 people who listen to this. Um, but also it's a we'll just leave it at that. So
Yep.
definitely didn't have a weapon, but took them on target, and that's an interesting position to be in. Um, going out with um, the boys at the time, going out with the boys out on target, not carrying a weapon. That's and
Well,
I don't ever remember bringing along a chaplain's assistant,
yeah.
just because you
Well, who
know
needs one of those when you got a ranger platoon surrounding you?
that's okay, true. Although I'm sure they would. And by the way, for recruiting purposes, the Ranger Regiment does have chaplain's assistants. I
Yeah.
met a guy who was originally a 13 Fox, a forward observer, and then I won't say names. And to be honest, he wasn't that good of one. But then he had reclassed and became a chaplain's assistant, and that seemed more aligned with sort of his attitude.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I don't ever remember us taking our chaplain's assistants out. We were way more likely to take out mechanics with us than chaplain's assistant. But I remember the chaplains going out, and
Hmm.
that's yeah. You got to feel pretty. You must feel pretty comfortable going out there wrapped in the armor of God, armor of the Lord,
Yeah, I think and that's a whole debate within the chaplaincy.
whether you should go out or not.
Yeah. It's like, what's the point? Yeah, and I'm not weighing in on either side.
Hmm.
I can see it. Okay, I I didn't have that desire to go outside the wire when I was serving as a chaplain. I've been there, done that. It's
Hmm.
dangerous.
Hmm.
And it's not
Sure.
only just dangerous personally, it's dangerous because you're one more person that these operators have to take care of.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm not weighing in on this. I'm not saying it's right, wrong, or indifferent. I'm just saying
Right.
I see the sides to it. And I also see the sides to where, okay, you're a chaplain, you're with all these stud operators who are doing these crazy missions, and there's a sense of like, well, I want to see some of this. It's just that crazy fascination of wow, I want to be in a scrape. I want to say I was downrange. I get it. I get it. The debate was, is that really very smart from a chaplain's not there to go out and fight. If you want to go out and fight, then there's other avenues that you can pursue in the military, and that's fine. But you're a potential liability, and you're a potential bigger liability in the sense that if something did happen to you as a chaplain, a non-combatant with no weapon, then now you perhaps have even compromised the mission because you have to peel away assets from a combat unit to take care of you or get you to safety or whatever. So I get that. I get that whole discussion, and I see the tensions in all those directions.
We were fortunate in my time that at Third Ranger Battalion that we had some unique individuals as chaplains.
Yeah.
One of them was uh, Jeff Strucker, who is he was a in army circles he's pretty well known, but he was a ranger. He served in 375. He was in BCO actually. So
Hmm.
he was a squad leader, or he was a senior squad leader for the Black Hawk Down thing, the thing that went down in Somalia. He was a line guy, and he had also been so he was an infantry guy, and he had also done time in what is now known as the Ranger Reconnaissance Company. So back in the day, so this was a guy who was like you as a chaplain showing up to the teams.
Yeah.
He was like our version of you. He
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
like coming back badged out,
Yeah.
all kinds of crazy things. You're like, this guy's our chaplain. Whoa, this is crazy. And also because of the movie, like everyone knew like what he had done, what he had been through. So he was like
Yeah.
kind of like a celebrity,
Right.
and he
Sure.
was our chaplain. So and they scrounged up other guys like him, guys who had done cool guy stuff in the past, and we just had a string of those kind of guys as our chaplain.
Yeah.
But yeah, I to be honest, like I always felt happy the chaplain was going out. I was like, hey,
Oh yeah.
elbowing the guy next to me, like, dude, chaplain's coming with it. We're good tonight. You
Yeah.
know,
Right.
and they'd always
Surely.
and they'd always give like very rousing prayers before we went
Uh-huh.
out.
Yeah, sure.
Um,
Sure.
so I was always like, all right, dude, we're good tonight. If anything
Yeah.
else, we're good. We're good here. So, um,
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, the Lord is with us. Yea, though we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, we
dude,
shall fear
every
no evil.
any little thing helps. Take a
Yeah,
chaplain. Take a
I get
chaplain.
it. Oh, I get it 100%. Yeah. And uh, there's you could look at it several different ways. And the chaplains at the SEAL commands where I served went in harm's way, whether for good or for bad. They went in some pretty hairy situations,
Mm.
but hey,
Do I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, no,
Do I mean, with respect to the Navy's version of the chaplain's assistants, I mean, in terms of like their preparedness to do the bodyguard part of their job,
mhm,
I mean, is it for 99% of them though, like is it pretty clear that they're unlike even during wartime that they're unlikely to actually need to
yeah,
you know take care of that responsibility.
yeah,
So,
100%.
but I think I remember you telling me about what you hooked up your assistant later on, but we'll get into that
Yeah,
later.
yeah.
Okay, so that's so okay, so you wrap up the chaplain school, and then what's next after that?
Yeah, so after Chaplain Basic, which is ethics and courses on how to meld with the institutional ministry of the Navy, you go to a Marine. I think it's called. It was something like the field course back when I did it. It's 3 or 4 weeks. And we did this in Columbia, South Carolina,
Hmm,
at Jackson, Fort Jackson,
Fort Jack, an army base.
an army base.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, that sounds right. That area.
Yeah. For a brief period of time, they tried to start a joint chaplain school at Fort Jackson, Army, Air Force, Navy. They had it for about a year, and then the Navy just didn't like it because we're not close enough to the water. So they moved it back to Newport, Rhode Island. But the field course might still be there. I don't know. But when I was in, that's where I went to do this portion of the course. So the what I call the Marine part of it is, again, Navy chaplains can be assigned to Marine units because we're the chaplains for the Marine Corps, the Coast Guard, and the Navy. So they want to teach you what it's like to bivouac, or what it's like to live in the field in a tent with minimal creature comforts. And that's, I could see that that's valuable, because these, like, again, these are not pre-military people. These are people coming out of seminaries and stuff, having all their creature comforts available. So everything from how do you shave in the field, how do you eat an MRE, to like stuff that, you know if you're coming from a combat background in any branch, this is just kind of comes by second nature because you just pound it into you. And what, how to set up a tent and a cot, and how to live in the woods. And we had a whole week where we bivouacked in a section of that base. So that was really funny because it cramped a lot of people's style, right? These are people coming with master's degrees who have never slept on the ground. I mean, maybe some of them like to camp, but many of them did not like to camp, and to put it mildly. And so it was like a whole new thing. And then they tried to throw stuff at us that would be like kind of combatish, like they did one night where it was just kind of like a little hell night where they're screaming and yelling, and people were running in the woods trying to figure out which way was up, and all this different stuff, which was, for me, I not to minimize any of it, but it was just kind of laughable. Like, well, they're
Well,
trying.
so like was the idea because you all can't handle weapons.
No, we can't handle weapons.
So it's not like you're practicing react to ambush or something, react to contact. So what was the expectation for you
Yeah.
all?
To stick our head in the ground like an ostrich.
Start
Uh,
praying,
yeah,
start
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 praying.
praying hard.
Oh Lord, I beseech thee. Yeah, well, some of it was coordinated with our RPs, our
Oh, okay,
chaplain
interesting.
assistants, Navy versions. And so they would do some little drills. We would do some drills. One of the funniest things that happened the entire time, and there were several funny things, and then that was from my perspective. I'm sure many of them thought this is god awful. This is not funny at all. I'm just going, really. So we had a Marine gunnery sergeant in charge. He was like our drill instructor, and he was going to whip us into shape, push us, kind of marine up the experience.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't too hard for the vast majority of these people. They've like, you know, and so like one time, I'll give you a couple of these, but like one time he's like, all right, pull-ups, let's go. And so and we're doing like palms away, strict up, clear the bar, lower yourself, like good military pull-ups. And he's like, yeah, I bet you all can't do 2 pull-ups. And me always the big mouth. I'm like, well, Gunny, I bet you I can do more than you. How many can you do? So he's like, oh, I could do 18. And I'm like, all right, let's go. So I was always like kind of up in the ante with him, just in a fun way. He really liked me and I liked him. He was cool. He was squared away. But I was like, yeah, really? But he had never had that from a chap, of course, not from my background. The best part was when we went out to do land navigation, land nav with a compass and a map, old school. And they gave us a class on this, one class, right? Now, if you've done a serious land nav course, it's not easy to find where you are and where you've got to go. That's not easy. It's a skill that's cultivated and crafted over time. And he gave us this quick class, like an hour class. He's like, now see this grid coordinate here? Now let me give you a grid coordinate. And they're just going, I could see him looking around. I'm like, hmm. And occasionally I tried to help him. I'm like, I'd raise my hand. He'd be like, Captain Watkins, like, when you say grid coordinates, break it down for these folks. They're not tracking with you, Gunny. And he's like, oh yeah, yeah. And he'd back up. He goes, whoa, what? You know, a click is a kilometer square, and all of this nomenclature that they were just like, I could see they were glossed over. And I could tell he was losing them in what he was teaching, like just shoot a reverse azimuth here. And they're like, what is an azimuth? What's a reverse? And I was like, oh boy, this is going to be interesting, because you had to go out. And so the field portion of that was like the following day. We went out early in the morning, and this was on Fort Jackson, and they had a whole land nav course. And if for those of you not maybe knowing is what we're talking about, they'll have a sequence of letters and numbers on different uh, posts on trees at different points where you're trying to find these in the wherever, in these woods, in these thick pine woods. And you've got to, with your compass and your map, navigate to that position. And then when you get there with your radio, you radio back, okay, we've reached point blah, blah, blah. And if it's the correct one, you call out the letters and number sequence on that plaque or whatever's on the tree. And they go, okay, you got it. Here's your next grid coordinate. And then they'd give you another one. It wouldn't give you the numbers and letters because that's the confirmation that you found the point.
Mm-hmm.
And then you navigate to that point and then call the numbers back. All right, so here's all these chaplains and RPs, chaplains assistants, and they broke us into groups of like one chaplain, because there were a lot more RPs than there were chaplains. So it was like 4 RPs and 1 chaplain, and they would send you out, and they're like, "Here's your map, here's your compass, go for it. Here's your first waypoint," and they're just like, mm. And I could tell. I just looked around, and I could tell, oh, this is going to be a long day, because you got to find all these points. I can't remember how many there were. And so I was given these 4 RPs and and they said, all right, see you later. The gunny said, see you later. Good luck. Like, all right, cool. And so we walked off, and you're kind of semi patrolling, it's kind of hokey because you're like, well, we're never going to be doing it. But anyway, so I went out and I was like, okay, here we go, guys. I said, anybody want to take this first one? And they're all like, I don't know what's going on. And I could tell that. And I'm like, all right, here, let me show you. And so I shot I did it on the chart. I was like, there's our point. I'm like, we got this is so easy because there were there were um there were roads that you could see on the topo map, the
Mhm.
topographical map, and you could see, oh, this is look, we just patrol. I was who wants to be the pace counter keeper, and just every every 100 steps, just give me a pull a bead, and I they didn't even teach us that. I taught them that. I'm like,
Mm.
okay, here's the bead system. See,
Mhm.
the gun he had forgotten to teach him stuff like that, like were
Mm.
easier ways to keep pace and all that. And so we just, cutting to the chase, it was just like, do, 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 do. I'm like, there it is. And they're like, wow. It's like it was magic. I'm like, no, man, I've done this so many. I was a point man in two freaking platoon, dropped off in South Korea in the middle of the night and had to find a freaking mountaintop. So it was like, oh, no big deal. And I think they started to get it. I'm like, okay, next one. I'm like, what am I looking for, guys? What am I looking for? And they're like, you're looking for roads and prominent terrain features. I'm like, exactly. That's your clue to this whole mystery. But it was not articulated well with a gun. So I mean, we seriously we flew through it. We got all of our waypoints by like it was something like 9:30 or 10 a.m. in the morning, and we'd
Mhm.
had everything.
Mm.
There were because I could hear radio traffic back to the gunnery sergeant who was back at the base where we launched from. I don't think one or two people had even found their first waypoint, their first grid coordinate.
Mhm.
And I'm like, I knew that was going to be the case because it was just so overwhelming and not nearly enough training for these poor chaplains and chaplains assistants, RPs. And so we come strolling back in to to where the gunny is. And I remember this is the funniest thing. And all my RPs were just, or the RPs assigned me, they were just like, whoo, we scored the jackpot. So I came back and like, he goes, Chapman Watkins. And I'm like, Gunny? He goes, all right, give me your book. Let me look at your waypoints. He wanted to double check. And I had my field book with me, and and he looks over, and he goes, they're all wrong. And I just laughed. I go, ha, no, they're not. And he goes, yeah, yeah, man, just take a break. Go get some water. Eat it, Amari. And we were done for the day.
Nice.
It took, it was like 6 o'clock that night, and I don't think any other group had found all of their objectives, but it was just, and I think part of it was to teach them the humility of wow, you need to things get complicated out there. But it was a funny, and all my RPs all afternoon they were just cracking up that they, because it was random that they were paired with
Mhm.
me, and it was easy. It was just like low hanging fruit.
Yeah, land that. What do you estimate the distance between points was? I'm sure it was variable, but like,
Yeah.
was it was it a? I'm sure it wasn't the largest course you'd ever been
Oh,
on.
oh, no way. Not even near something serious. It was like half a mile at the most.
Yeah, there's one on Benning that gets used by a bunch of different schoolhouses, and it's like a grid. It's like a click square, like
Mhm.
that's it, and it's got like 10 points in it, and
Wow.
I was stationed there, but you get so used to that plate, like, and
Yeah.
it's so small that you get the trails,
Oh, yeah.
right? Well, that's the other thing. It's like handrail something until you spot
Yeah.
the well-beaten path that takes you directly that takes you directly to the point. But what I was gonna say is, yeah, for land nav, for a lot of folks, and I'll even say it like infantrymen I've seen, rangers even,
Yeah.
for some people, land nav is a lot like golf, like it just depends on the day. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like
yeah.
some days they're aces, and then some days like they just suck.
Yeah.
And I've seen plenty of people have like bad days, and they're there all night. You're like, dude, what's going on? What are you doing? He's like, man, I'm not figuring out. I I always I was always consistently average. Like I never had a I was pretty. I don't ever remember doing land nav and not getting the points I needed to get in the
Yeah.
time I needed to get it. I don't ever remember retesting, but I wasn't like some sort of like guru or anything like
Right.
that. But I just remember some guys just having a tough day. and then not to mention if you do something stupid and you end up plotting a course through like a swamp or
Oh,
through thick
yeah,
brush or something, like, that can change everything.
that's always there. You know, that's exactly right. And I think some people, like my own dear family member, ha some people I think have a terrible sense of direction just naturally.
Mm,
Like,
mhm. Right.
um, like my one family member, God bless her, she'll get lost. I mean, like it doesn't take much, and she's really turned around. And hey, all of her outstanding qualities, it's just weird that way because I always kind of had this instinctive. Well, that's probably why I ended up appointment. I just kind of had a good sense of direction, and I mean, I can get turned around like anybody, but
Mhm.
I mean, give me a map and a compass and a overall study of that map before I head out, and I'm probably not going to get terribly lost. But some people, it just seemed like they just don't have a sense of direction. This one
Right.
family member of mine who gets turned around will put up her hands like this to see, oh, L left, that's this hand, because
Whoa.
it makes an L, and it's like, whoa, baby, you get out in the woods and that's not going to be helpful. But
Well, it's also very easy to overcomplicate it too,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah,
It's like
it is.
it's and sometimes the schoolhouses make it tough because they don't let you handrail things,
Hmm.
and for someone who does handrail is like you have usually it's like a road or maybe
Right.
it's a creek or something, and
Yeah.
then you're really what do they call it? Terrain.
Terrain feature,
Yeah,
prominent terrain features.
something like that. Yeah, like when you're navigating by terrain features, like
Yeah.
that's the easiest way because then it's like following like a shopping mall map, right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay,
Exactly.
keep the Cinnabon on my right,
Yeah.
past the Claire's, and then boom, there's where I need. It's the same thing. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
well, keep that road.
Yeah.
Make sure it's the road you think it is, first off. Like, keep that road
Yeah.
to my right, and
Yeah.
then, I always did, like, counting hills. How many
Right.
times up and down I go? Go up and down 3 times,
Yeah.
boom, I should be there. If I run into the radio tower, I've gone too far. And it's like that simple.
It's pretty simple, and that's what I taught these guys,
Mhm,
that were with me, the RPs. I said, "Look, see this road? See this
mhm,
road? See this Y in the road?" I'm
mhm.
like, "Dude, we can't miss. It's gonna walk us to the target." And you're
Yeah.
like, "Oh, okay." It's kinda like cheating, but no, it's learning how to read a topo map. And the first thing when I looked at that map, I'm like, "Oh, we got roads. Oh boy. This is gonna be an easy day."
The thing that especially and we're running out of time here, but the thing
Yeah.
that always screwed me up at first while I was learning was, like, differentiating between what looks like a Y for a road, like a Y,
Yeah.
versus like you come up to it and it's like a T-bone intersect, like a T
Oh,
intersect.
yeah, yeah.
You're like, I was expecting a Y, but this
Yeah,
looks like it comes straight off of it. So that was funny.
yeah,
Okay, well, we're out of time. I think when we come back to your story, we're going to talk about where you got assigned afterwards. Maybe you got a few
yeah,
more stories from this course, and then we'll meander our way to figure out how you got to development group and all that.
yeah.
So thanks everyone for your time. We'll catch you in the next one.